Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Kristen Welker in Washington, where the White House appears to be shifting both its tone and its tactics in Minnesota, with the president acknowledging a need to, quote, de-escalate as the political fallout from the fatal shootings of 2 American citizens continues to grow. But even as the White House tries to turn down the temperature, the president today also warning Minneapolis mayor, quote, not to play with fire and to cooperate with the federal government. In an interview with Fox News yesterday, the president was asked about his decision to shake up the leadership of his team in Minnesota and replace Greg Bovino, whose aggressive tactics have made him a controversial figure. Here's what the president said.
You know, we have Tom Homan there now. We put him in there. He's great. And they met with the governor, the mayor, everybody else, and we're going to de-escalate a little bit. I don't think it's a pullback. It's a little bit of a change. Bovino's very good, but he's a pretty out there kind of a guy. And in some cases, that's good. Maybe it wasn't good here.
And we're learning new details about the moments surrounding the killing of Alex Pretti. NBC News has obtained a preliminary internal Customs and Border Protection report, which says 2 agents fired their guns during the confrontation and that during the scuffle, an agent shouted, quote, he's got a gun. But the report makes no mention that Pretti ever held or brandished that gun, as administration officials, including DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, have claimed. NBC News also learned that the 2 agents who fired shots at Pretti have now been put on leave. Meanwhile, a growing number of Republicans are voicing their frustration with the administration following the shooting.
And so when people watch that video and the government tells them, well, he was assaulting the police officers, nobody with any objectivity watches that video and believes that's what's happening.
Senator, do you have faith in Kristi Noem as DHS Secretary?
I've already made a statement on that.
Oh, I wasn't there for it?
Yeah, I said that I've lost confidence in her.
Do you think that President Trump should remove her from the position? Do you think she should resign?
That's obviously up to the president. But I think we would be better served with new leadership at the department.
I think if Noem looks at her body of work, I could not be. If I were in her position, I can't think of any point of pride over the last year. She's got to make her own decision, or the president does. But she has taken this administration into the ground on an issue that we should own.
He just stepped down. Does she need to?
Stephen Miller is in the same boat. This guy, after doing the stupid comments he made about Greenland getting the president in a difficult circumstance, is one of the people that came out publicly and said that this guy was a terrorist before he had even talked with anybody on the ground. And that's clearly not the case now. So, I mean, it's just, I mean, Stephen Miller never fails to live up to my expectations of incompetence.
There was also a frightening moment during a town hall in Minneapolis last night when a man rushed towards Democratic Congresswoman Ilhan Omar and sprayed her with a substance as she was calling for Secretary Noem to step down. Take a look at what happened.
Noem must resign or face impeachment.
Congresswoman Omar did continue her town hall after the incident, and the man is now under arrest. President Trump, who has repeatedly publicly attacked Omar, telling NBC News that he hadn't seen the video and that, quote, she probably had herself sprayed knowing her. Joining me now is our terrific team of reporters. NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba joins me from the White House, along with NBC News correspondent Morgan Chesky on the ground in Minneapolis, NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley, and NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona. Thanks to all of you for starting us off on another very busy news day. Monica, let me start with you. So we're hearing the president talk about the need to de-escalate. Take me inside your conversations inside the administration. Are we seeing a shift in strategy?
I think so, Kristen. I think all of these different moves taken together do amount to that, though it is a little too early to tell whether the actual tactics on the ground and what we're going to see perhaps play out in Minneapolis in the coming days will actually look very different. But certainly the message from the president and the administration is a different one, with a little bit of a softer tone at times, though you are still seeing administration officials say that the president plans to implement his tough immigration enforcement policy and plans, and that is why Tom Homan, the border czar, is going to be there. But the acknowledgement, the tacit acknowledgement of the president saying that we're going to de-escalate a little bit tells you everything you need to know, because he's acknowledging that whatever the administration was doing there had escalated things to a point that now they need to be brought down. down. So I think you are hearing from White House officials that they want to see if this can help ease tensions, and certainly the conversations that the president has been having with the governor of Minnesota and the mayor of Minneapolis, that tells you, too, that they're trying to do this, even though some of the rhetoric is still pretty heated from the administration. Kristen.
Yeah, absolutely, Monica. And, you know, it's interesting in talking to some of my sources, they point to the fact that this is a president who understands the power of television. How have these images, Monica, and these optics played into this shift that you're tracking?
He really understands the optics, and he was all weekend essentially watching those images play out after the death of Alex Pretti, and he was following this along and really eventually grew quite disturbed, we're told, by a senior administration official, and that's when he knew he needed to make a change, and that's how you saw eventually the new leadership structure that was announced and the eventual departure of Gregory Bovino of the CBP. Again, they're still going to carry out, federal agents will still be carrying out what the president wants to see when it comes to these broader immigration goals. But I do think it is a bit of a different way, and the president doesn't want to see those scenes repeated, we were told by this official, and he doesn't like to, quote, see chaos unfold on his watch. Kristen.
And against that backdrop, Monica, the finger pointing has begun. What do you know about that?
Yeah, and this is something that is a little bit more reminiscent of the first Trump term, where we did see this repeatedly, different factions emerging with contrasting narratives of who's up and who's down and who really could be to blame here. Something that was extremely notable last night was the fact that you had White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller out with his own statement on the record, essentially saying that he believes that CBP may have not followed some kind of protocol that he talked about, saying that they are reviewing that, but we are unclear on what this new protocol is. He also said that that initial statement from DHS, the one that came out just after Alex Pretti was killed, was based on reports from CBP on the ground. Remember, of course, it was Stephen Miller who had called him a domestic terrorist and a would-be assassin. But also in this statement, he refers to the fact that he believes there should have been a physical barrier between the arrest teams and the disruptors. And again, that's what they say they are now looking at. And that is what raises a lot of questions, Kristen, because he indicated this was a new White House guideline that went out, but it's unclear to whom that went out. And again, the fact that Stephen Miller is essentially putting the blame elsewhere, with officials at DHS saying that they were also getting chaotic reports from on the ground, tells you that there just simply are competing elements here of different people that the president says are very important to his policy operation. And he has stood by, and the White House has stood by for now, Stephen Miller and Kristi Noem at this time.
All right, Monica Alba, starting us off. Thank you so much for your great reporting, as always, on this developing story, Monica. Really appreciate it. Morgan, let me go to you in Minneapolis. I want to get your perspective on the ground there. What are local officials saying about President Trump's call to de-escalate? Is there a sense that things are de-escalating?
Yes and no, Kristen, and it's been an interesting 24 hours to follow, because yesterday we see this changing of the guard of sorts. Border Czar Tom Homan arriving, the departure of Border Patrol Commander Greg Bovino, and then we hear from Governor Tim Walz, from Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, saying that they did both meet with Homan in person and that those conversations were productive. Both Walz and Frey said that there needed to be an ongoing dialogue. But what's interesting today, Kristen, is that here we have federal officials saying that, yes, a number of federal agents will be departing Minneapolis as early as yesterday. But I had a chance to meet with the governor this morning when he came here to this memorial to pay his respects to Alex Pretti. I asked him about that very thing. Take a listen.
Right. Spoke to the president and then heard him say how good a job Kristi Noem's doing. And then a statement that really took me back was the president said he himself will oversee investigations. That is so wrong on so many levels, and it's the last thing that we want.
Governor, are you aware that any agents have actually left this city?
No, I have not been. I have no evidence they have.
So, Kristen, while we've been told that Commander Greg Bovino is headed back to California where he will be resuming his old job, the question over whether or not ICE agents, other federal agents, will be leaving Minneapolis still very much up in the air. Residents here I've spoken to say they're hearing the words, but they're certainly waiting to see tangible proof. And I think that counts for the governor as well.
Absolutely. Great job tracking him down, Morgan, and getting those questions to him. Let me ask you about another development there. There are reports that federal agents tried to enter the Ecuadorian consulate in Minneapolis yesterday. What more are you learning about that?
Yeah, videos captured an ICE agent trying to enter the premises there. He was kept outside by one of the employees inside the consulate. We know that the country of Ecuador released a statement to the U.S. embassy there saying this type of action cannot be repeated again. Kristen.
All right, Morgan Chesky on the ground there in a frigid Minneapolis. We appreciate your reporting and your interview with the governor. Thanks so much, Morgan. Julia, let me turn to you. So let's start with one of the big developments today, which is that the two agents involved in this shooting have now been put on leave. What do you know about that?
Well, that is what is supposed to happen. In fact, that's what was unusual when the ICE officer involved in the Renee Nicole Good shooting was not put on leave. They said he was taking time with his family, but that appeared to be voluntary. As you see throughout federal agencies and usually with local law enforcement, there's leave after a fatal shooting, no matter who's to blame, so they can conduct an investigation. It's also so that if an officer has been involved with killing someone, they likely need time off before they're put back on the beat. They're just not mentally ready to go back to that. It does not mean that this is a disciplinary action. It's more that they've identified that there were two officers and they've been put on leave. If there is a disciplinary action, they could likely be put on unpaid leave or suspended entirely. But that decision would come from the Office of Professional Responsibility within CBP.
And all of this taking place with an investigation underway. You heard President Trump say that he wants to oversee it. Governor Walz responding, saying that he believes that's wrong on so many levels. What is the status of this investigation, and are state and local officials involved in any capacity at this point?
You know, we did hear a statement yesterday from Governor Walz after his meeting with Tom Homan that he wants his Department of Public Safety to be working with the government. But that doesn't mean that they've been given all access. You know, that really has to do more with the protests that are currently on the ground. As we understand it, this still lies within the Department of Homeland Security, and that if they get enough information, they could refer it to the Justice Department for a criminal investigation. But so far, according to our reporting or any public reporting that's out there, that referral has not been made yet. And that's key, because typically it would start with the Justice Department. They would never speak to the White House or the agency responsible for this. They would be conducting the investigation. They would be talking to people like the bystanders who have said they haven't been contacted yet. And we would expect that investigation to take some time and not to have people jumping to conclusions so early.
And let me just get what you'll be watching for with Tom Homan now on the ground there.
You know, I think there could be a change. I don't want to be too quick to jump to it. But the thing that I've always taken away from my conversations with Tom Homan is that he really believes in two things. One is that sanctuary cities should not exist, so that places like Minneapolis need to cooperate with ICE, but also that the first priority needs to be going after criminals. That means someone's name on a piece of paper. That does not mean going up to people at a gas station and asking for their papers. And that's what we saw under Greg Bovino. So there could be a real change here, but I don't think he's going to back down on this insistence that they get cooperation from Minnesota. And it doesn't look like the governor's budging there either. So a lot to watch.
Yet another standoff. All right, Julia, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. Let me turn to Melanie Zanona now on Capitol Hill. Mel, talk a little bit about the backlash that you are tracking there, particularly this growing opposition to funding Homeland Security. Government set to shut down on Friday. Where do you see this going?
Well, it does appear to be headed in the direction of a shutdown at this moment. But I will tell you, there are lawmakers in both parties who are trying to find an off-ramp here. Democrats did huddle for their lunches today behind closed doors, where they came up with a list of demands that they want to see in this DHS funding bill fight. And the three things they are asking for: number one, ending roving patrols. Those are those sweeping immigration checks. Number two, applying the same use of force standards that are applied to state and local police. And number three, prohibiting masks, as well as requiring body cameras for ICE agents. Meanwhile, on the Senate floor right now, you have Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar speaking about the tragedy in Minnesota. The question, though, is whether Republicans are going to be willing to play ball. They have already rejected some of those ideas. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent did tell our Julie Sirkin today that Trump appears to be at least a little bit more engaged in this process than he did in the last shutdown fight. Let's watch some of their conversation.
Again, the government shutdown hurt the economy. It was the longest shutdown in history. So I don't believe that we have to shut down. I don't believe that we should shut down. But it's always an economic hit. Some of it gets pushed forward. We will see some of the shutdown, the economic growth appear in the first quarter, but then there's some that's lost forever, especially in the service economy.
So do you anticipate a shutdown? Do you think the administration will make a deal with Democrats on the Hill?
I know the president's been in contact with Republican leadership. He's been in contact with some of the Democratic leadership, so we'll see. The president is trying to prevent the shutdown. We've got a great economy.
But time is running out to come together on a deal, and if they don't, that means a significant portion of the federal government is set to shut down at midnight on Friday.
Just extraordinary to think that could happen after the longest government shutdown in history. Mel, let me turn to this attack on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. The video is absolutely terrifying. The president now falsely saying she staged the incident. What's the latest there?
Well, there's been mixed reaction here on Capitol Hill. Democrats and even some Republicans did come out and swiftly condemn this attack. That includes firebrand Congresswoman Nancy Mace, who even acknowledged she vehemently disagrees with most of what Ilhan Omar says and stands for. But she also said no one deserves to be physically attacked. That is not who we are. But then there are other Republicans who have really echoed the president, and that includes Randy Fine. He's a Republican from Florida. He took to social media and essentially downplayed this attack, saying, I don't know what Ilhan Omar is so upset about. He also blamed the left for legitimizing political violence. And this all comes, Kristen, as threats to members of Congress are on the rise. According to the Capitol Police, just last year, they investigated nearly 15,000 concerning statements against members of Congress, their staff, or their family members. And that's a nearly 40% increase from the previous year. It's also a record high since they even started tracking these numbers. But it all comes as the Capitol Police force is already understaffed and overworked. So that's been an ongoing problem here on Capitol Hill, Kristen.
Just staggering numbers to see in print. Melanie Zanona, thank you so much for your great reporting, as always, from Capitol Hill. We really appreciate it.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.